What I notice about meditators in Malaysia is that they are very dedicated to practicing meditation under the guidance of teachers. And most of them are very compliant. They listen to what the teachers tell them, and they continue their practice according to the instructions that they have received in retreats or in Dhamma talks. What is sadly lacking among meditators in Malaysia is that they are not encouraged, one thing, to read up the suttas, nor do they show any interest in wanting to check their practice with what is written in the suttas. They are more content with merely following the instructions of their teachers or their particular tradition in which they grew up spiritually. Nowadays, with the plethora of information available on meditation, whether in the internet, in books, or even in centers around, Buddhist centers or spiritual centers, a plight of the people living in Kalama during the Buddha's time becomes very much relevant to our modern society. I'm sure many of you have heard of the very famous Kalama Sutta, where the Buddha was asked by a group of people in the area called Kalama. When the Buddha approached that particular area, that village, the people told the Buddha that there are many samanas and brahmanas, priests, recluses or renunciants and priests who come to their village, and each of them proclaim that theirs is the right way and denounce others. These days, with so many claims as to the efficacy and authenticity of meditation methods, I think it's even more important for us to take more pains to study the suttas to see what the Buddha really taught. So the structure for our retreat this time is going to be based on the suttas. What am I going to do is I'm going to read passages from the suttas and try to relate to what we are doing here. In particular, I want to stress the importance of the Anupubba Sikha, the gradual training. There was a sort of template, a default template that the Buddha used for his disciples. A default template, if you're familiar with the world of computers and IT, is something that has a certain fixed structure where you base whatever you're doing on. And of course, you can customize it according to your needs. And that is precisely what the Buddha's teaching is all about. Although the Buddha has a default template, he is not so rigid that he requires everyone to follow that default template. In fact, as you read the suttas, you will know that the Buddha gave the same message but in different ways to different people according to the level of spiritual maturity or inclination or temperament of the people that he was talking to. Tonight's talk will be based on one particular sutta which I selected from the Majjhima Nikaya, sutta number 107, called Ganaka Moggallana Sutta. This is an interesting sutta where an accountant approached the Buddha and asked him whether he has a graduated training or practice, just like people of other skills and crafts. When they train an apprentice, they have to go through a certain structure in their course. If you want to obtain a PhD, for example, you have to go through primary school, secondary school, then get your bachelor's degree, master's degree, then can you research further and write a thesis for your PhD. So there is a graduated training. So in this sutta, Ganaka Moggallana approached the Buddha and asked him whether he has an equivalent sort of graduated training. This is very important because the training of the Buddha for his disciples is not a certain thing that you jump into. The Buddha would usually say that it's a gradual training. One of the wonders of the Dhamma Vinaya is that it slopes like the gradual slope of a beach into the great ocean. It is not like a cliff where you jump suddenly overboard. So it has to be done in a gradual manner. I think modern meditators nowadays seem to think that they can jump straight into meditation without fulfilling the other preliminary steps. So this sutta makes it very clear that the Buddha has a default template, so to speak, for his disciples, although there are always exceptions to the rule, depending on a particular person's capability, inclination, and potential. So listen. Ganaka Moggallana Sutta, Sutta number 107 in the Majjhima Nikaya. Thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Blessed One was living at Savatthi in the Eastern Park, in the palace of Migara's mother. Unquote. It's not the palace actually. I don't know why they translate the word pasada as palace. It's probably a mansion, a multi-storied building. And Migara's mother here refers to Visakha. You know, right? Visakha, the very famous lady supporter of the Buddha. She built a monastery called Pubarama, Eastern Park, as is translated here, for the monks. And it's called Migaramatu Basada. Basada means a multi-storied building. Let's get back to the sutta. Then the Brahmin, Ganaka Moggallana, went to the Blessed One and exchanged greetings with him. When this courteous and amiable talk was finished, he sat down at one side and said to the Blessed One, Master Gotama, in this palace of Migara's mother, there can be seen gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. That is, down to the last step of the staircase. Among these Brahmins too, there can be seen gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. That is, in study. Among archers too, there can be seen gradual training, etc. That is, in archery. And also among accountants like us, who earn our living by accountancy, there can be seen gradual training. ... That is, in computation. For when we get an apprentice, first we make him count 1 1, 2 2s, 3 3s, 4 4s, 5 5s, 6 6s, 7 7s, 8 8s, 9 9s, 10 10s. And we make him count 100 too. Now, is it possible, Master Gotama, to describe gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress in this Dhamma and discipline? It is possible, Brahmin, said the Buddha, to describe gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress in this Dhamma and discipline. Just as Brahmin, when a clever horse trainer obtains a fine thoroughbred colt, he first makes him get used to wearing the bit and afterwards trains him further. So when the Tathagata obtains a person to be tamed, he first disciplines him thus. Come, Bhikkhu, be virtuous, restrained with the restraint of the Patimokkha, be perfect in conduct and resort, and seeing fear in the slightest fault, train by undertaking the training precepts. Unquote. So this is talking about the bhikkhu's training. So the first thing that a bhikkhu needs to do after he is ordained is to learn up the monastic rules. Patimokkha here refers to the code of monastic rules, and the Buddha is saying that after you have learned the code of the monastic rules, you should try to train yourself accordingly and to see danger in the slightest fault. Not to just disregard minor matters and say, well, this is only a minor precept, it doesn't affect my meditation, so I can just forget about it. Now, what the Buddha is saying is that you should try to be impeccable in your precepts. So for all of you, you're all temporary bhikkhus for these few days. In fact, you may even qualify to be better bhikkhus than most bhikkhus, because you are practicing meditation, you are practicing restraint of the senses and so forth. If you look around at the other members of the Sangha who are non-meditators, you may actually see that their behavior or their conduct is not as restrained as that of a yogi. So, to all intents and purposes, we can say that you are bhikkhus and you are actually trying to fulfill the precepts according to the 8 precepts and other rules and regulations connected to this meditation retreat. So this is also relevant to you. Let's get back to the sutta. When Brahmin, the bhikkhu is virtuous, restrained with the restraint of the patimokkha, perfect in conduct and resort, seeing fear in the slightest fault, and he trains by undertaking the training precepts, then the Tathagata disciplines him further. Come, bhikkhu, guard the doors of your sense faculties. On seeing a form with the eye, do not grasp at its signs and features. Since, if you were to leave the eye faculty unguarded, even evil, unwholesome states of covetousness and grief might invade you. Practice the way of its restraint, guard the eye faculty, undertake the restraint of the eye faculty. Unquote. So what the Buddha is saying is, first you observe your precepts. After you have observed the precepts, after you have become impeccable in morality, then only will the Buddha say, okay, now the next step is to guard the doors of your senses. What do you mean by guarding the doors of the senses? Actually, how many senses do we have? 6 senses. Buddhists have 6 senses. Well, we consider the 5 plus the mind as a 6th sense door. So, guarding the laws of the senses means guarding the avenues through which objects of the world impinge into your field of awareness. So he says here, if you see an object with the eye, you must guard your eye door in such a way that your mind does not react with unwholesome states. That means no. Here it says covetousness and grief. It should not be taken literally. Covetousness literally means desiring to possess something or someone that belongs to somebody else. And grief refers to very acute sense of loss and sorrow. These 2 terms are sometimes used, and I suppose in this particular case as well, they are used to refer to the states of lobha and dosa. Lobha means states of attachment, liking to more intense forms of greed and lust. And then dosa refers to subtle forms of dislike, to intense hate, rage and anger. So it's not easy to guard the sense doors because you need a high degree of mindfulness, right? If you see something or hear something or smell something, taste something, or you feel something with the body, or even if you are aware that you have a certain thought or emotion, if you don't guard your sense doors carefully, then you will inevitably react to it with lobha or dosa. It's quite a big step, just perfecting your moral precepts, and then suddenly you go to guarding the senses. So this requires quite a high degree of mindfulness, although we can grade it according to different levels, maybe grosser to more subtler levels of mindfulness. Let's continue. On hearing a sound with the ear, on smelling an odor with the nose, on tasting a flavor with the tongue, on touching tangible with the body, on cognizing a mind object with the mind, do not grasp at its signs and features. Since, if you were to leave the mind faculty unguarded, evil, unwholesome states might invade you. Practice the way of its restraint, guard the mind faculty, undertake the restraint of the mind faculty. Unquote. Now let's come back to the eye faculty. Here it says, do not grasp at its signs and features. What does that mean? In practice, if you're a male yogi, and now right here is a bit different, but some of you might have attended our Pindachara session at Hokkien Tiong, Hokkien Cemetery Pavilion down there. So we monastics will have to go down there every morning to collect our food. Usually there will be quite a large group of people gathered there to offer food. And as you know, most of them are women. Maybe 70% are women. These are not always regulars. Sometimes we have drop-in visitors from Taiping or from other places. So they may not be very modestly dressed. They might be wearing shorts or wearing very low cuts, exposing parts of the body. So as a monastic, when you go down there, we go down there with our eyes lowered, but you can actually see these things at the corner of your eye. You can see that a pretty little girl is standing at the corner. So how do you guard the door of your senses? Okay, you can see it at the corner of your eyes. If you are able to guard the door of your senses, you will know, don't see. So bring your attention back to the body, watch the bodily sensations, and so forth. But if you're not careful, and then you catch someone at the corner of your eye, and then you want to look, and that's when you grasp at the signs and features. First, you just roughly see something at the corner of your eye, and then when you look clearly, then you can see, oh, it's a low-cut dress, which part of the body is exposed, and look at the proportion, look at the shape, look at the complexion, and so forth. You see, that's where you get caught up in all that. As a yogi also, it's the same. Not only with respect to visual forms, but with respect to other things as well. To what you hear, you smell, and you taste, as well as what you feel. Don't get caught up in the signs and features of these objects. So you have to guard the mind very well. When you sense something at the corner of that sense door, you don't go beyond it. Come back immediately. That's why I always say, try to use the body as your anchor, as your reference point, because the body sensations are more neutral in nature. If you look at something, it might arouse desire or lust. Let's get back to the sutta. When Brahmin, the bhikkhu, guards the doors of his sense faculties, then the Tathagata disciplines him further. Come, bhikkhu, be moderate in eating. Reflecting wisely, you should take food, neither for amusement, nor for intoxication, nor for the sake of physical beauty and attractiveness, but only for the endurance and continuance of this body, for ending discomfort and for assisting the holy life, considering, thus I shall terminate old feelings without arousing new feelings, and I shall be healthy and blameless and shall live in comfort. Unquote. This is the third step. The first step is to observe your precepts. Second step is to guard the doors of the senses. And the third step is to be moderate in eating. At one time when I was giving this talk, someone from the audience asked me, how come the second step is more difficult than the third step? Because it's easy to be moderate in eating, but it's not so easy to guard the doors of your senses. Particularly your mind door. You have thoughts arising during your meditation, and then you get caught up in your thoughts, in your imaginations, in your hallucinations, in your memories, and reacting to the emotions that arise within you. Isn't that difficult? It's difficult, right? Isn't it easier to just be moderate in eating? It's interesting because when you eat, actually all your six senses are being stimulated. When you sit in meditation, you don't smell, you don't taste. And if you close your eyes, you don't see anything. You only got how many senses? You got your ears, and your body, and your mind. Only three. But when you're eating, all the six senses are being stimulated. Right? So, you have to be especially careful when you are eating. Eating is also a very important part of mindfulness practice. It is found in the Satipatthana Sutta. Although the Buddha says, here a monk acts with full comprehension, with full awareness, when he's eating, when he's drinking, when he's tasting, when he's chewing, and so forth. So, how does one practice eating meditation? Well, you start off by going to the dining hall, you hear the gong, and then you see how your mind responds. At last it's lunchtime, I'm famished, right? That is a thought. The first thing that you note. And then you walk down. As you walk down, look at your mind. What is it thinking of? I hope they have char kway teow today. I hope they have this today. I miss this, I miss that. So these things might be playing around in your mind. So you watch that as well. Watch that, let that go, come back to your steps. And as you go to the dining area, You could see some things at the corner of your eye and then say, wow, that looks like a nice dish. So all this chatter and comments start again in your mind. Watch that as well. Even before you start eating, you see, your mind is already doing all this commentary. And then when you go to select your food, look at your mind. Why do you select a certain food? Is it because of the taste? Or is it because it's really good for you? As you can see in this reflection, when you're taking food, you're actually taking it for sustenance in order to practice the holy life for the sake of meditation, not to eat to enjoy the taste. If you know some healthy ways of eating, you might perhaps know that certain foods are not suitable for you. Then you should avoid those foods that are not suitable for you and take those foods that are suitable for you. When you start to take your food, when you do your selection, you can watch your mind to see what is the basis for selecting a particular sort of food. Is it because of your likes and dislikes? Is it because of the taste? Or is it because of the appropriateness and usefulness and suitability of that food? Then as you take the food, you also have to see the quantity. Not take too much and not to take too little. If you take too much, then you're going to spoil a few hours of meditation. You'll be so sleepy and groggy, you can't meditate. If you take too little, you might have a good sitting after your lunch, but in the evening and in the morning, you're going to suffer. So you need to know the exact amount, and it takes some time for your body to acclimatize to your new routine and your new dietary needs and metabolic rate. So you have to be sensitive to the needs of your body. Okay, so after you have taken all your food on your buffet plate and then sit down to eat, then again you have to look at the food and be aware of your movements as you take the spoon, scoop the food, and then put it into your mouth. Be aware of the movements involved, be aware of the sight as you see the food. You know, how is your mental reaction? You like it, you don't like it. Then as it comes near to your nose, you can smell, is it nice or is it not nice? And you put it in your mouth, the first thing you would feel is the taste. Feel the taste, see how your mind is reacting to it. Do you like the taste? You don't like the taste? After that, you probably put another scoop of rice with the dish, or you put the rice first and the dish later, whatever it is. Then you put down your spoon, close your eyes, and chew. And while you're chewing, you can actually watch many things. This is going to be your homework. Tomorrow when you come for interview, you're going to tell me. Okay? When you chew, what is the most prominent part of the eating process that catches your attention? Many things happen when you are eating food. Your jaws are moving, then you're hearing a lot of sound at the ears, and then your tongue is also moving, pushing the food from one corner to another. You're also tasting the food, and your mind is also reacting, whether you're liking it or disliking it. You're also feeling the texture of the food. If you take something very crispy, it might be nice and crispy at the beginning, but after some time, it becomes very mushy. Before you swallow, everything is mushy, no matter how good it is. Imagine if you spit it out and have a look, do you think you put it back in your mouth? Okay, so that is food. So as you eat, be aware of all your mental reactions to it. How you like it, how you dislike it, and then how you want more. And this is one thing that you must train yourself. Before you reach out for the next spoon, for the next scoop, make sure that you swallow. While you are chewing, don't reach out for the next scoop. Many of us have a lot of greed in us. While we are eating food and it's, wow, this is really great, delicious. And before you finish tasting it, you're already reaching for the next one. You have not really enjoyed fully the taste. It's still in your mouth. Enjoy it fully first. Let it go down the throat and then only take the next scoop. So it's how you want to watch what's happening to you when you are eating. So you see, all your senses are being stimulated. You see, you hear, you smell, you taste, and you feel the texture in your tongue as well. And then you have your mental reactions, liking and disliking, and greed, wanting more. After some time, as you get used to that, watching all those things, at first it might be quite novel, so many things to watch. After some time you get bored with it, and you might find, as one of the yogis said, that eating is a real chore. Chew, 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 all this swing, You chew until your jaws become very tired. Normally you're not conscious of it, but if you are meditating on the eating process, it becomes very obvious. At one time, someone even remarked to me, I didn't know that eating was so noisy, and I wonder whether my neighbor can hear me eating or not. Because it's making such a din at your eardrums. So what I want you to do is to tell me which of these processes is the one that is most predominant to you while you're eating. Are you watching the chewing most of the time, the jaws moving, or are you watching the sound, or are you enjoying the taste, or is your mind running off thinking of this and that? Even when you're eating, your mind is not really with the eating. You're not fully enjoying what you are eating. Your mind may be restless and thinking of this and that. So I want you to watch everything and tell me tomorrow. And tell me how many % of the time do you actually enjoy the taste of the food. So that's why this is the third step and not the second step, because it involves all your 6 senses. Let's go on to the sutta. When Brahmin, the bhikkhu, is moderate in eating, then the Tathagata disciplines him further. Come, bhikkhu, be devoted to wakefulness. During the day, while walking back and forth and sitting, purify your mind of obstructive states. In the first watch of the night, while walking back and forth and sitting, purify your mind of obstructive states. In the middle watch of the night, you should lie down on the right side in the lion's posture, with one foot overlapping the other, mindful and fully aware, after noting in your mind the time for rising. After rising, in the third watch of the night, while walking back and forth and sitting, purify your mind of obstructive states. Unquote. So the next step after you are able to practice moderation in eating is to practice wakefulness. It's logical, isn't it? If you eat too much, how can you practice wakefulness? Right? You must eat just enough, not too little and not too much, so that you can be wakeful for the rest of the day, and to just take a break in the middle watch of the night. There are 3 watches in the night, and how long is one watch? Say the night is 12 hours, right? You divide by 3, so one watch is 4 hours. That's how we calculate nowadays. But one of our monastics says, how do you know? Maybe the first watch is only 2 hours, and the middle watch is 6 hours, then the last watch is 4 hours. Well, the Buddha had very high standards. If you follow that 4-hour watches, then it means that you sleep for only 4 hours. So 6 to 10 is meditation, 10 to 2 is sleeping, and you get up at 2 and start to meditate again. I'm not insisting that you do that. I think you have to take some time to get to that sort of ideal wakefulness. So rest your body first. As you do your practice and the momentum of your mindfulness and concentration gathers, then you will be able to cut down on your sleep. What is more important now is to practice moderation of eating so that you do not feel drowsy after your lunch, and you do not feel too hungry or weak in the evening and in the early mornings. Let's go on to the sutta. When Brahmin, the bhikkhu, is devoted to wakefulness, then the Tathagata disciplines him further. Come, bhikkhu, be possessed of mindfulness and full awareness. Act in full awareness when going forward and returning. Act in full awareness when looking ahead and looking away. Act in full awareness when flexing and extending your limbs. Act in full awareness when wearing your robes and carrying your outer robe and bowl. Act in full awareness when eating, drinking, consuming food and tasting. Act in full awareness when defecating and urinating. Act in full awareness when walking, standing, sitting, falling asleep, waking up, talking, and keeping silent. Unquote. So what the Buddha is saying is that you should try to be mindful throughout the day, whatever you're doing. Be with the present moment, with all the movements of your body. Here in this particular sutta, the Buddha refers to full awareness with respect to the body only. But in another sutta, in the Samyutta Nikaya, in the Satipatthana Samyutta, the Buddha also refers to full awareness not only to bodily postures, but also to the mind. And he asks, how does a bhikkhu act with full awareness? He says, here, known a thought arises in a bhikkhu, known the thought persists in a bhikkhu, and known the thought passes away. Which means that knowingly a thought arises, knowingly a thought persists, knowingly a thought passes away. So you have full awareness of what is happening in your mind. Then also he says you have full awareness when feelings arises in you, and feelings persist, and when feelings pass away. There's also full awareness when perceptions arise in you. Full awareness when perceptions persist and when they pass away. So not only are you fully aware of your bodily movements, but you should also be fully aware of your thoughts, your feelings and your perceptions, when they arise, when they persist, and when they pass away. So this is full awareness. Note that in this particular passage, there is a combination of two words, mindfulness and full awareness. Nowadays, people seem to think that mindfulness means full awareness. But you will see here that mindfulness is one thing, full awareness is another thing. Two words are combined in one phrase. Mindfulness here is actually a translation of the word sati. Earlier on, I taught you Buddhanusati, and then you were also doing Anapanasati. So sati here refers actually to remembrance, remembering the virtues of the Buddha, remembering to watch your breath, remembering to be with the breathing process rather than absent-mindedly being distracted by something else. Mindfulness also refers to remembering instructions. So remembrance has got different levels. The first level of sati is remembering instructions that your teacher has given you. The second level is to remind yourself to be focused on the object that you're supposed to be meditating on. As you watch your breath, sometimes you run off and then you say, hey, I'm not supposed to be thinking, I'm not supposed to be dreaming, I'm supposed to be watching the breath. Then you remind yourself and you come back to your breath. Or when you're walking and then you have all these useless chatter and comments that are happening in you, then you remember, hey, Bhante says must watch them, let them go and come back to the present moment. So you remind yourself to come back to the present moment to whatever you're doing. So this is also part of mindfulness. Mindfulness is the ability to remember what you have been taught, to remind yourself, and to remember to reflect on the immediate past, to look at it in a more minute analysis. Actually, what we perceive through our senses are perceived through the sense consciousness. Your eye consciousness can only see forms or colors. Your ear consciousness can only hear vibrations. Your nose consciousness can only smell odors. Your tongue consciousness can only taste. And your body consciousness can only feel sensations. It is the mind consciousness, which occurs in the sixth sense door, that reflects on what the sense consciousness has experienced. So it is actually a past object. And this is particularly obvious when you are watching the mind. When you have anger arising within you, and then you are aware of the anger, the moment that you are aware of the anger, you are no longer angry. The anger is a past object that mindfulness has taken. So in this way, mindfulness is also looking at a past object, but it's an immediate past object. An immediate past object that has been seen at the eye door, or heard at the ear door, or smelled at the nose door, or tasted at the tongue door, or felt at the body door, or even thoughts and emotions that arise at the mind door. After they have arisen, immediately you look at them, you remember them. So that is the function of mindfulness. Full awareness means you are fully aware of all these things through mindfulness. Mindfulness is the one that brings you back to the immediate past, and full awareness is the one that makes you understand what is happening. Let's go on to the next one. When Brahmin, the bhikkhu, possesses mindfulness and full awareness, then the Tathagata disciplines him further. Come, bhikkhu, resort to a secluded resting place, the forest, the foot of a tree, the root of a tree, a mountain, a ravine, a hillside cave, a charnel ground, a jungle thicket, an open space, a heap of straw. Unquote. So if you want to go into seclusion, make sure that you have fulfilled the previous steps. Make sure that you have already got moral integrity, that you can guard the doors of the senses, you're moderate in eating, you can practice wakefulness, and you have mindfulness and full awareness. If you don't have these 5 prerequisites and you resort to a secluded place, you're asking for trouble. And you could be assailed by a lot of defilements and you can even go crazy. When prisoners become too nasty, they are put on solitary confinement as a form of punishment. But prisoners who have gone through intensive 10-day retreat with Goenkaji, after their retreat, they request for solitary confinement because they don't want to be hassled by the other prisoners who are non-meditators. Alright, let's get back. He resorts to a secluded resting place, the forest, the root of a tree, a mountain, a ravine, a hillside cave, a charnel ground, a jungle thicket, an open space, a heap of straw. On returning from his alms round after his meal, he sits down, folding his legs crosswise, setting his body erect, and establishing mindfulness before him. Abandoning covetousness for the world, he abides with a mind free from covetousness. He purifies his mind from covetousness. Abandoning ill will and hatred, he abides with a mind free from ill will. Compassionate for the welfare of all living beings, he purifies his mind from ill will and hatred. Abandoning sloth and torpor, he abides free from sloth and torpor, recipient of light, mindful and fully aware. He purifies his mind from sloth and torpor. Abandoning restlessness and remorse, he abides unagitated with a mind inwardly peaceful. He purifies his mind from restlessness and remorse. Abandoning doubt, he abides having gone beyond doubt. Unperplexed about wholesome states, he purifies his mind from doubt. Unquote. In short, he overcomes the 5 hindrances. These are the 5 hindrances that obstructs you in meditation. The first one is actually covetousness, which is a synonym for sensual desire. That's the first hindrance. The second is ill will. Third is sloth and torpor. Fourth is restlessness and worry. And the fifth is doubt. So after he has mastered mindfulness and full awareness, he resorts to a secluded place, then he sits down, establishes mindfulness before him, and abandons all these 5 hindrances. How does one do that? It is not specified in detail in this sutta. In many suttas, the Buddha gave specific antidotes for these hindrances. For example, if you have very compulsive tendency to have a lot of thoughts regarding pleasures of the senses, then the Buddha would prescribe Asubha meditation, which is contemplating on the loathsome parts of the body or contemplating on corpses at various stages of decay. If you are suffering from bouts of ill will, grudges against certain people, then you'll be told to do loving kindness meditation. If you're suffering from sloth and torpor, then you'll be told to practice on perception of light so that your mind becomes bright instead of dark and constricted. Then if you have restlessness and remorse, you'll be asked to do anapanasati. And if you have doubts, then you are supposed to associate with people who can clear your doubts. So there are various antidotes that are given for people suffering from particular types of hindrances. However, in the Satipatthana Sutta, there are actually 4 establishments of mindfulness. Establishing mindfulness in the body, feelings, mind, and Dhamma. The 4th one, establishing mindfulness in the Dhamma, it talks about how one can make use of mindfulness to overcome the 5 hindrances. In the Anguttara Nikaya, Book of 9, Sutta number 64 and 65, it is also mentioned that there are 5 things that weakens one's training. What are they? Killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, telling lies, and taking intoxicants. And in that particular sutta, it is said that, but the practice of the 4 satipatthanas, the 4 establishments of mindfulness, can abandon these 5 things that weaken one's training. Then in the next sutta, Sutta 95, it talks about these 5 hindrances. And it says that by the practice of the 4 establishments of mindfulness, one can overcome these 5 hindrances. And so by default, in our short retreat here, we will be using the 4 foundations of mindfulness to overcome the 5 hindrances. In the 4th foundation of mindfulness, 4th establishment of mindfulness, it is stated that here a bhikkhu knows when sense desire arises in him. So what you do is that when sense desire arises in you, you note it, be aware of it, and then let it go and come back to your primary object. As you do that again and again, when the time is ripe, when you've seen it enough times, then you can see the cause. Why is it that sense desire arose? Why did it arise? Is it because you caught sight of something? Like earlier on in guarding the doors of the senses, you caught sight of a beautiful, desirable object. And instead of cutting it short then and coming back to a more neutral object, you followed your curiosity, and then after that, it becomes a nimitta for you. When you sit down there, you see this nimitta. It's not a nimitta of anapanasati, but it's a sensual nimitta that excites you. So that's how sense desire arises, because you don't guard the doors of the senses. In fact, in the commentary, they give us a list of factors. What are the conditions for sense desire to arise? And one of the things that I mentioned is if you do not guard the doors of your senses properly. Another thing is if you eat too much, you'll be so sleepy, and you sleep a lot, then your mind will tend towards having sensual thoughts. These are the 2 causes: eating too much or eating too rich food, and also not guarding the doors of the senses. So this applies to all the other hindrances. If you have ill will also, be aware of the ill will, be aware of the unpleasant state of mind, let it go, and come back and watch the physical manifestations of that unpleasant state of mind. As you do that often, you'll be able to see the cause of it. Why does that ill will arise? And as you see the cause, then you can undo it. If you don't see the cause, you are just suppressing it. So this will take some time. You've got to see it again and again and again for your insight to blossom. Okay, let's go on to the next one. Having thus abandoned these 5 hindrances, imperfections of the mind that weaken wisdom, quite secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unwholesome states, he enters upon and abides in the first jhana, which is accompanied by the applied and sustained thought, with rapture and pleasure born of seclusion. Unquote. After this, it talks about the development of the 4 jhanas, one after another. Let's recapitulate. We start off with the precepts: guarding the doors of the senses, moderation in eating, wakefulness, mindfulness and full awareness. You resort to a secluded place and you try to abandon the 5 hindrances. After that, only do you do the jhanas. If you want to do the jhanas, you still have to go through all these steps, right? Step 1 until step 7. So before you do the jhanas, do the other things first. After he finished talking about the 4th jhana, the Buddha continued. This is my instruction, Brahmin, to those bhikkhus who are in the higher training, whose minds have not yet attained the goal, who abide aspiring to the supreme security from bondage. But these things conduce both to a pleasant abiding here and now, and to mindfulness and full awareness for those bhikkhus who are arahants, with taints destroyed, who have lived the holy life, done what had to be done, laid down the burden, reached their own goal, destroyed the fetters of being, and are completely liberated through final knowledge. Unquote. So the Buddha concluded by saying that this is his gradual training, his default template for his monks. And although he says that the jhanas here are meant for those bhikkhus who are in higher training, who are aspiring for arahantship, this course of training from precepts until the attainment of jhanas are still useful for arahants in order for them to maintain mindfulness and full awareness in their daily life, so that they can have a pleasant abiding in the here and now. So these steps are also followed by the arahant, not only by those who are aspiring to be arahant, but even an arahant also goes through all these things. There's one particular sutta. This is found in the Majjhima Nikaya, sutta number 38, called the Mahatana Sankhaya Sutta. Here the Buddha is talking about the Paticca Samuppada, the law of dependent origination, and how one can stop the law of dependent origination so that one is liberated from the cycle of birth and death. He's talking about restraint of the senses. On seeing a form with the eye, he does not lust after it if it is pleasing. He does not dislike it if it is unpleasing. So what does he do? When you encounter an object with the eye, and that object is desirable or lustful, how do you prevent your mind from being affected by it? If it is an unpleasant object, how do you prevent your mind from being influenced by that unpleasant object and evoke displeasure or dislike? So the Buddha here says, on seeing a form with the eye, he does not lust after it if it is pleasing. He does not dislike it if it is unpleasing. He abides with mindfulness of the body established, with an immeasurable mind, and he understands as it actually is the deliverance of mind and deliverance by wisdom, wherein those evil, unwholesome states cease without remainder. Having thus abandoned favoring and opposing, whatever feeling he feels, whether pleasant or painful, or neither painful nor pleasant, he does not delight in that feeling, welcome it, or remain holding to it. As he does not do so, delight in feeling ceases in him. With the cessation of his delight comes cessation of clinging. With the cessation of clinging, cessation of being. With the cessation of being, cessation of birth. With the cessation of birth, aging and death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief and despair cease. Such is the cessation of this whole mass of suffering. Unquote. So what the Buddha is saying is that the key to guarding the doors of the senses is once you realize that your mind is being attracted or distracted by a particular sense object, then you don't allow the mind to take up its signs and features. Immediately bring your attention back to the body sensations. That's why he dwells well established in mindfulness of the body. That's why I always say, bring your attention back to the body sensations. These are the best neutral feelings for you to anchor your mind to have a reference point. So tonight's talk is giving you really a very structured and graduated course of training that was laid down by the Buddha for his disciples. And unless you are a very special and extraordinary person, you will have to follow this template. During the Buddha's time, most lay disciples got enlightened or attained the first stage of enlightenment not by going to retreats, but by listening to Dhamma talks. How many of you have listened to Dhamma talks? For how many times? If you haven't achieved enlightenment yet, you better follow this gradual training. Okay? You need to do Arahant and Metta only in the morning session, maybe half an hour each. For the rest of the day, please do Vipassana meditation or Satipatthana meditation, being aware of what's happening to your mind, how your mind is responding or reacting to the six senses, and establishing yourself in mindfulness of the body as your reference point. I also noticed that some of you have been doing Qigong or Tai Chi, and you can actually keep track of your movements and your intention. You need to keep the body healthy in order for your mind to develop well in meditation. In the early mornings or in the evenings, you can actually do Qigong or Tai Chi. Yoga is a bit difficult because of space constraint. Also, many of you have been trained in Anapanasati, the Samatha sort of Anapanasati, and you find it difficult to deprogram your mind to do something else. Your mind has a lot of resistance in wanting to do Arahant or Metta, or even to do general mindfulness. I think that you need to change your attitude. The Buddha taught a whole range of meditation subjects to his students, and they are actually versatile in them. The reason, as I said, why you were taught Arahant and Metta is because it's part of the four guardian meditations. They are supposed to protect you at the appropriate time. Like I said, If you sit in a sampan and you travel across a river and it capsizes, it's not the time to learn how to swim. You have to learn how to swim before you get onto the sampan. So try to master Buddhanusati and Metta Bhavana so that when the time comes, you will be able to make use of it. When you experience frightening encounters in your meditation or in your lodging at night, or when you're walking and then you meet a cobra or a wild boar, you have to do metta immediately. You cannot do it to your mother, to your father, or to your sister. But first, you got to do it straight to the wild boar or to the cobra. So you have to learn to be versatile. And then when you have a nightmare at night, feel that yakas and demons are grabbing you, you have to do Buddhanusati then, or do metta at that time. You cannot wait to do anapanasati. So please deprogram your mind, change your attitude to be more versatile in your meditation object. I also noticed that some of you are slowing down, walking very, very slowly, but other people might be misled into thinking that that is the norm. That is not the norm. The norm is to follow your own pace. If you feel comfortable walking slowly because your mind can keep up with what's happening without strain, then go ahead and do it. However, if you feel that you want to walk faster and your mind can still follow the movement, go ahead. Please don't compare with other yogis. Each of you should follow your own pace. Then, as to walking meditation, I'd like to clarify that there are actually two ways of doing walking meditation, depending on what is your objective. If you want to develop your concentration, then you should just be aware of the movements of your leg. But if you want to develop wisdom, you want to gain an insight into how the mind works, then you don't focus your attention on the leg that is moving, but you sort of take a step backwards and look at all your six senses and see how your mind is reacting or responding to the six senses. Where is your mind? How it moves from one object to another. But you must remember that if you want to try that sort of approach, make sure that your mind does not have too many discursive thoughts. If there are too many thoughts going on, bring it back to your legs first, and then when you're more stable, open up your awareness to see how the mind moves from one object to another and how it is connected by causes and conditions. And otherwise, try to develop your concentration first. Then, another thing that I've been stressing is letting go of thoughts, staying in the present moment. Now, earlier on in the Ganaka Moggallana Sutta, the Buddha talked about practicing mindfulness and full awareness. Full awareness is sampajana, and sampajana has been elaborated by the commentaries to mean four different things, four aspects. And the first aspect is full awareness or clear comprehension of purpose. Second is suitability. Third is resort, and fourth is non-delusion. What does that mean? The first one is when you want to do something, you must be fully aware or clearly comprehend the purpose of what you want to do. So there's a sort of reflection, and that is also a part of what we call yoniso manasikara, wise attention. Understand the purpose of what you intend to do. And then secondly, you must also comprehend the suitability of what you want to do. The purpose might be justified, but it might not be a suitable or appropriate time to do it. The third one is more connected with the object, whether you are straying from your meditation object or not. If it's straying from a meditation object, you should try to bring it back. The fourth one is about non-delusion. It means being able to perceive reality as it really is, not getting involved in thoughts or interpretations about your experiences, but just being aware of experiences for what they are and then coming back to the present moment. So when I talk about letting go of thoughts, don't think too much, and coming back to the present moment, be with your bodily movements, I'm referring to idle chatter and all these random comments that are going on in your mind in the course of the day. Sometimes you need to think in order to act. When you need to think in order to act, then you also exercise full awareness. According to Samyutta Nikaya, it says that you're fully aware when a thought arises, when a thought persists, and when the thought passes away. You're fully aware when you have feelings, when they arise, when they persist, when they pass away. You're fully aware when you have perceptions, and when they persist and when they pass away. So you must still be fully aware of your thoughts, feelings and perceptions, but not to get carried away by all these thoughts. bring them back to the present moment, particularly if they are idle and frivolous thoughts. But if you have